Video lecture 4.8 will focus in on tornadoes, something that definitely affects us here in Indiana. We'll be working with the definition of tornadoes as a violent rotating column of air that's attached to a thunderstorm. Of all the atmospheric events that we've discussed, tornadoes are the most violent, with winds reaching upwards to as close as 300 miles per hour. Tornadoes are a good example of an extreme low pressure. And of course, with that being said, with the high winds, we're going to see very closely spaced isobars that measure pressure. An origin of a tornado begins as a mesocyclone, which is a rotating updraft within a storm. I'll describe it and showcase this in a following video. Another characteristic of a tornado is a funnel cloud often pops out of a mesocyclone, but it's only a funnel cloud if it doesn't touch the ground. If it does touch the ground, then it's called a tornado. I'm going to use a real simple demonstration to show how a tornado comes to be. We start off with that mesocyclone. So how does a mesocyclone form? And we begin by using this demonstration by putting a pencil, a writing utensil, something in your left hand, and then with your right hand moving it across the top of that pencil. What that's doing is it's simulating those upper level winds that move faster than the surface because of friction that is found at the surface. And so those upper level winds move faster, creating this rotation, which is the origins of a mesocyclone. Then eventually you get the updraft. Once again, you got the warm updraft that occurs. It's common along the cold front, and that updraft is then going to cause this rotation to then go on its side. And then once it's on its side, a funnel cloud pops out, and if a funnel cloud hits the ground, we got ourselves a tornado. As I mentioned before, various weather phenomena, we describe it based on key characteristics. And so in the case of tornadoes, we describe their strength, known as the Fujita scale, as wind speed plus property damage. So it's one of those interesting things that are measured actually during the event, wind speed, but also after the event in terms of the amount of property damage that has occurred. More characteristics of tornadoes are they're never more than a mile wide, and so compared to hurricanes, a much smaller scale. Don't make a joke, ladies, but they last anywhere from a few seconds to an hour, so these aren't going to be all day long weather events. Further, they're most likely to occur between 3 and 9 p.m. in the late afternoon time period. Although they can happen at other times, they're most likely to occur during that late afternoon time period. Further, they occur on every single continent but Antarctica, and they actually are found everywhere in the United States as well, where they kill about 60 per year and are the most frequent of all the countries in the world are here in the United States in terms of tornado numbers. Like I said, they occur in every state. And it's kind of interesting. We only have 60 people dying per year, considering we have about 800 to 1,000 tornadoes each year. There's one specific region, specific area in which tornadoes are most common. They are common here in Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky a bit, but they're most common in the Great Plains, United States, further to the west of us here in Indianapolis. For sure, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas, Kansas are your traditional states, and of course Wizard of Oz proves that. One of the things that also we find in this area is the perfect breeding ground for these tornadoes, in which you've got warm, moist air that collides with cold, dry air. And so the breeding ground for that collision is this area of the country, which they've actually said, all right, we'll deal with. We'll actually embrace it. And so the Oklahoma City Thunder have changed their name from the Supersonics to the Thunder to recognize that local dominant weather phenomenon. Another way to accentuate and explain the mid-latitude cyclonic tracks that happen throughout the year, we can also see the general specific places that we would expect and times of year to find a tornado. And so in January, you're most likely to find those in upstate Florida, whereas early spring, you're going to see them more there in SEC football country in Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana. But then eventually you move up to March, they're in Tennessee, Kentucky, April in Indiana. And in fact, April and May are two of the most severe weather in terms of tornadoes in Indiana by far. But then by the late summer, you're going to see tornadoes most likely up there in the upper Great Plains in Minnesota. One way to showcase the idea that you're more likely to find severe weather in the springtime than the fall is the fact that the temperature gradient from Minnesota down to Louisiana is much higher during the springtime. In other words, there is a greater difference between temperature in Louisiana and Minnesota. Essentially, there's more lines on this page, as this is showcasing isotherms at a 5-degree interval. And so one of the things is severe weather. It likes it when there's opposite types of air masses, when there's conflicting air masses that come colliding with each other. And as we begin to get into that late summer, early fall period, there isn't as big of a difference, a temperature gradient from Minnesota to Louisiana. Now we only have 4 lines that showcase temperature differences from the top to the bottom here in this image. Of course, we're not going to memorize when all of these various tornadoes have occurred, but the most deadly in Indiana have been in that March-April period, with that one outlier being the one in June. Using some passive remote sensing, you can actually see the track of a tornado that came through Evansville. And the problem with this one is it was one of those anomalies in which it did not happen between 3 and 9 p.m. Instead, it came around 1 a.m. when a lot of people were asleep and thus unprepared, causing a much higher death toll and casualty toll than one would expect for this area, especially with advancements in technology. If you're asleep, you're not going to be able to hear that weather alert on the television or radio broadcasts. Now we'll see some before and afters of some tornado tracks down in the southern part of the country, down there near Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And here you can see that tornado track of a before and after photo. So here showcases these destruction, but it's never really, it's not going to be a vast area. It's usually a very narrow destruction path. Students, for some reason, are enthralled with before and after photos, and so here's one that shows a mile-wide tornado that really wiped out this area, a May 4th, 2007 tornado in Kansas, which had a result that included the entire 95% of this town being obliterated, to the point we see the destruction here. So once again, tornadoes are the most violent of all atmospheric events, although at a very small scale.